Good afternoon, and welcome to the Outdoor Art Club presentation, State of the County, with Supervisor Stephanie Moulton-Peters. My name is Deborah Duck, and I'm working with fellow OAC Zoom team member, Cherry Jones, to bring you today's program. For those of you not familiar with the Outdoor Art Club, we are a nonprofit women's organization founded in 1902. The club engages in civic, cultural, and charitable work in our community. Every year, through fundraising and rentals of our historic clubhouse, we are able to fund a number of community grants to support local nonprofit groups who share our club's purpose. We are using the Zoom platform today. Zoom has two different functions, one for chat and the other for Q&A. Please use Q&A to send your questions to the supervisor anytime during the program. We are reserving time at the end, and she welcomes your questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce Janet Hines. Janet is a member of the Outdoor Art Club and is the program chair for today's event. Welcome, Janet, and thank you for bringing us today's program.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you to Deborah, Cherry, and the Zoom committee for providing the technical assistance for these wonderful webinars and for guiding us through the Zoom process. I really appreciate all of your help. I'm privileged to introduce our speaker for today, Stephanie Moulton-Peters. In March of 2020, Stephanie was elected Marin County Supervisor for District 3 in Southern Marin with 80% of the vote. She assumed office in January 2021. Her district includes Sausalito, Floating Homes, Marin City, Tam Valley, Almonte, Mill Valley, Alto Sutton Manor, Strawberry, Tiburon, and Belvedere. Previously, Stephanie served over 12 years on the Mill Valley Council and as mayor in 2010, 2014, and 2018. During her tenure on the Mill Valley City Council, she was known for her ability to get things done and for solving real life problems. As supervisor, Stephanie's focus is on keeping people safe, ensuring the health, well-being, and quality of life for everyone by furthering wildfire safety, racial equity, environmental sustainability, affordable housing, clean transportation, and strong local economies. Welcome, Stephanie. We look forward to your update on the state of the county.
Thank you, Janet and Deborah and Cherry. I am so delighted to be back with the Outdoor Art Club again today with your members, many of whom are friends and longtime acquaintances, and also with members of the public. I have been in the audience as a member of the public many times for these presentations. I thank you, all of the Outdoor Art Club members, for your many contributions to Mill Valley and the larger Marin County community. The role you play is essential in the health and wonderful quality of life in our community. So I want to thank you for the opportunity. I am, 4 months into the job as county supervisor. It is an extension of my work as a city council member in Mill Valley, and I think I'll always be a council member first and a county supervisor second. But it is a set of new responsibilities for me, in addition to familiar work that overlaps with what cities and towns do. And I bring into the work that I do now in Southern Marin my ongoing commitment, as Janet said, to keeping people safe. And this involves, in terms of the pandemic, the wildfires we face, emergency preparedness, evacuations of local flooding, and then I'm a big believer in planning for the future. And this is climate change and sea level rise. A little closer in, it's affordable housing and addressing homelessness, which I'll talk about later today, and ensuring health and well-being and equity for everyone in our Southern Marin community. And addressing racial equity is a major goal and part of the work that I do, addressing systemic racism, providing homes for all income levels, and then programs and services for people of all incomes and backgrounds. There are other things I'm known for. The Miller Avenue Plan and addressing traffic and multimodal transportation continues to be a priority for me. supporting our chambers and our local businesses in Southern Marin, very important and much needed right now as they work to get back on their feet as the economy opens up again. And then I think close to the interests of your civics group, I've always been a member of the League of Women Voters. I believe in transparent, responsive, and accessible government. And I'm seeing that the county is a little more remote than City Hall, right across from the Outdoor Art Club. And so I'm working with this government, as I did with Mill Valley, to strengthen our ability to communicate and make it easier for people to connect with us. So I want to start with health and safety, and top of the list, of course, is the pandemic. And we've all lived through a year like no other. We're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, although it's not really an end of a tunnel. It's just a brightening, I think, in a situation that's going to continue for us, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the impacts, both psychologically, physically, and economically. But there are good stories to tell. Marin County has the highest vaccination rate in the state of California, and this is something we can be very proud of. Our public health department did a magnificent job of working through what was a very bumpy start with the delivery of testing, the delivery of vaccinations. The delivery of the entire program was hampered by the fact that we did not have public health infrastructure in place that we should have. And I think the current president and the administration are working now to rebuild our public health infrastructure so that we are ready in the future. So what does this mean to Marin County? Well, our vaccination rate, as I said, is the highest in the state. For white residents, 60% are fully vaccinated, and another 16% are partially vaccinated, with vaccines now opening up to 16 years old and above this week. Asian Americans are vaccinated at a rate of 59%, and 21% again additional have had one vaccine. For Marin residents who identify as African American or Black, 51% are fully vaccinated, and 17% have received one of 2 doses. And then finally, for those who identify as Hispanic or Latinx, 54% are fully vaccinated and 24% partially vaccinated. So this is a very good story to tell. I can tell you that in terms of the minority community, this county made a very intentional effort to get vaccinations into these communities. I served on a community advisory panel that worked very hard to work with local nonprofit providers to give outreach, information about vaccinations, make vaccinations available in the communities themselves. We're now following up with mobile vaccinations. And what we're finding, 80% of the population overall has received at least one vaccination, leaving us with about 20 now who either we just haven't reached or may have vaccine hesitancy. And so we have extra efforts now to, again, employ mobile units and spend a little extra time for those who may still need some more information and reassurance to make their decision. Finally, I'll just say we had another very strong strategy in terms of vaccinating our seniors population, as well as those in our residential and living and nursing home communities. And that really worked to our favor, not only for those individuals themselves, but for those in the medical field, the first responders, our essential workers, everybody benefited from this strategy. So we did a lot of things right with regard to the whole pandemic. It is true that we have variations that are showing up in different parts of the country and the world. So far, California variation is not the most virulent, and it is one that we seem to be having success managing. And the other variations, so they're here, they're affecting smaller populations. And we do have good contact tracing to follow those who've been identified. but a work in progress. And I think our own Mill Valley Larry Brilliant, pandemic expert, has been an advisor and continues to advise the county on this. Moving to wildfires, which is a issue, I think, for all of us in Mill Valley, whether you actually live in the canyon neighborhoods in the WUI Wildland Urban Interface Zone, or you live in areas adjacent to them. I think everyone knows that Mill Valley has made an extensive effort itself to prepare for wildfires, prepare for evacuations. This effort is happening now all over the county, thanks to the Marin County Wildfire Prevention and Preparedness Joint Powers Authority that we voted to fund last year. That group will coordinate efforts among fire departments, will provide additional funding for vegetation management and for evacuation planning. They are about to embark on a very groundbreaking study of our roadways and their potential as evacuation routes, and identifying the obstacles or issues that need to be addressed on our roadways, in putting us in a position to plan ahead for the future to make improvements for evacuation purposes. Always more to do, and let me just say, we each have a responsibility for hardening our own homes. And what this means is that our homes can be not only ignition sources, in other words, fires start within our homes, but if vegetation around our homes or things, flammable things on our decks, these are issues as homeowners we need to tend to and make sure that we have reduced the fire risk around our own homes and that our neighbors have done that. Every community has a chipper program. Fire Safe Marin is an organization that supports the chipper program. Neighbors can go together and do cutting of vegetation, pile it out on the street, and it will be picked up and chipped and taken away for free. Okay, let's see. Public safety shutoffs with PG&E are unfortunately, but a part of our prevention strategy. These things need to happen. PG&E is coordinating more and more with the local communities. You may have seen them in our Mill Valley neighborhoods recently, including out in front of the Outdoor Art Club. I just live up the street, so I noticed trimming that was going on along the power lines on West Blythedale. It takes a little getting used to. It is being done for our safety and to keep the evacuation routes open and passable should we need to use them. I'll touch briefly on climate change and issues there, and then move into Golden Gate Village, housing and homelessness, and then I'll open up to your questions. So the long-term emergency, besides wildfire, now we can add drought, and then climate change and sea level rise. I am one of those who believes that climate change has exacerbated both our wildfires, our drought situation, the storms we experience and that are experienced in other parts of the country. It's just magnifying whatever our weather patterns are being magnified. And so the council members throughout Marin County have been working together for a number of years on climate change initiatives. The county is a part of this whole effort. We have an effort many of you have heard about here at the Outdoor Art Club, Drawdown Marin County. And this is where we've identified 7 areas where collective action, including our own personal choices, but also more on a regional or countywide basis, strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and our own global footprint. And that's by, reducing energy use, moving towards electric appliances and electric vehicles that have less greenhouse gas emissions associated with their use, green recycling of vegetation and kitchen vegetable and fruit waste, things like that. These are all things that you'll hear more and more about in community promotions on these drawdown initiatives. Separate from that is an initiative to address sea level rise. It's no surprise to anyone, Marin County, along the bay and along the coast, we have a lot of coastline that will be impacted by rising seas. There are efforts on both the coast and the bay side. I happen to chair the county city initiative called Bay Wave. We have looked already with county staff and with state grant funding at where existing flooding occurs now. Many of you will know it at Manzanita and Tam Valley, but there are also areas in Corte Madera, of course, Tiburon, and Mill Valley, lower Mill Valley, in the lower Sycamore area, and in the El Monte area that do flood. So no easy answers. We know where the water is going to be. We are beginning to look at both green infrastructure, marshes and horizontal levees. I can talk more about those later that can be put in place, as well as the gray infrastructure, we call it, which is seawalls and the like, which they do employ currently in the Belvedere Tiburon area. These will all be part of a coherent strategy that will be knit together. We got good news recently at a meeting I called with Caltrans. They are looking very seriously at their own highway infrastructure, both for sea level rise impacts, as well as how can their highways potentially play a role in the solution of sea level rise. So we've opened conversations with Caltrans. They're beginning to, they've identified their own priorities, and we'll be collaborating with them on future solutions. There are efforts at both the regional level here in the Bay Area to address sea level rise, and on the state level. It will all converge over time. There will be some tough choices for us to make in terms of how we fund it, how we protect areas here in the Bay, and where we may not be able to protect certain areas in the Bay will also be on the table. I want to turn for just a moment to the Richardson Bay. Those of you who hail from Sausalito and Belvedere who may be watching, and certainly from Mill Valley and Tiburon, know that we are dealing now with a homeless encampment in Sausalito at Dunphy Park that arose in part as a consequence of people leaving their boats on the water where they live, but during the winter storms, it quite frankly is quite dangerous to be out on Richardson Bay. And so some people moved off the water into tents, and the encampment now is about 20 individuals. We think about half of them came off the water, half have been joined by other individuals who are experiencing homelessness. We are working mightily with our Bay, Southern Marin communities and the county to find housing solutions. We, as a county, have been very successful. We've housed, in the last 3 years alone, we've housed over 325 people who were formerly homeless. And we've done this by adopting what is called now a housing first policy. And very simply, what that is that for those who are homeless, we do have social workers who will meet with them, understand what their needs are, and then evaluate them and put them in a priority process for getting housing depending on their needs and the emergency situation they're facing. And then we house them and we provide supportive services to them, whether these are food and supplements or counseling, behavioral health, drug addiction services, what have you. In the old days, we used to make everyone get cleaned up and then they could have housing. And what we found is that people do better when they're stable and in housing, and then they can address the issues they have, which also may involve job training and just getting back into the workforce after a difficult break. So as regards to the anchor out situation, you'll be hearing more about this. The Bay Conservation and Development Commission, BCDC, has determined that people living full-time on the water, unless they are in marinas, actual docks with slips, that this is not legal, and that we need to move people and transition them either into marina slips or onto land into permanent housing. So we're working through steps to make that happen. It doesn't happen overnight, but that's the direction we're going. And we have a people first solution in all of this. I want to move briefly now to Golden Gate Village, the public housing located in Marin City that is in need of renovation. It has been for a number of years. Many of you may know that the HUD, the Office of Housing and Urban Development, has not funded the maintenance of public housing adequately for years. And what this means is that the maintenance needs of these housing facilities are not addressed. We happen to have a particularly beautiful public housing village in Golden Gate Village. It was designed by a colleague of Frank Lloyd Wright's. It was built around the same time as Frank Lloyd Wright's Civic Center was built. And it is very sturdy and very lovely public housing from the external side. Internally, as with our homes, the systems inside, plumbing, electricity, and just cabinetry and furnishing needs to be upgraded and replaced. There's a process to go through to organize a large-scale renovation project like this. Some of you have asked, it is the case. We've been in the planning process for this renovation for quite some time. I am meeting with residents of Golden Gate Village this coming week, Royce McLemore and Barbara Bogard, to discuss the residents' plan. There is commonality to some extent with the plans that the county has developed, and there are some areas of difference, and we do need to flesh these out and understand each other's point of view and how we might come together to develop a consensus plan. And that is where the Board of Supervisors is going in the coming months, is to go back out to the community, both in Golden Gate Village and the larger community, and have a discussion of what's wanted out there, some of the requirements that we are addressing in the public housing arena with HUD, and how we can come together behind a plan that we can all get behind. And I'm committed to that. I have said I'd love to get this project done in my first term of 4 years, but if I have to take 2 terms, I'll get it done in 2 terms. So I'm happy to take additional questions on that. And then finally, I'll just say for our local business economy, very important. I know how important our downtowns are to the health of our communities. We have wonderful local merchants. They've been severely impacted in the COVID years. The county and the cities have been working together to coordinate and organize the efforts to support businesses, both with federal and state funding, with local initiatives and philanthropy. As the economy opens up again, there will still be a bumpy road, I think, as we all adjust to a new normal. But for me, supporting our local businesses is a high priority in getting back to a new normal. So I'll close just by saying, someone asked me, what is the difference between being a council member and a county supervisor? And I'll say it is public service through and through in both cases. The horizon as a county supervisor incorporates health and human services. That's something that the cities don't do, but collaborate on. When I came into office in January, I found a very, very busy county staff who was dedicated to the health and safety of our community. People had been reassigned to jobs working in testing clinics, in outreach and education, in responding to the food and rent assistance needs of the community, and then to setting up the vaccination clinics. And you'll recall that getting vaccinations and coordination was a bumpy road. You had a very motivated group of employees. They really did a marvelous job. We have community partners, nonprofits who are part of that. And what I felt as I came in was a real esprit de corps from county employees who were very mission driven with something that was very important to them to keep our community alive and safe. and they've done a marvelous job with this. We're now moving to a time where people are transitioning back to their original jobs. Some of them maybe not go on to go back into billing and accounting. It's not quite as compelling as being firsthand with people and helping with vaccines and all that. But from my point of view, you have a very dedicated county staff working for you. And I'm glad I'm here and can be a part of that. And now I'm going to thank you for taking these remarks and be happy to open to questions with Janet. And thank you again for the pleasure of being with you today.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was a lot of information. So we had some questions that were submitted ahead of time, mostly around the Golden Gate Village project. You answered a lot of those questions, but I just want to make sure that some of these questions, if you have the ability to answer them, that they get asked. So it seems like what one of the persons said, that 2/3 of the residents are opposed to the county plan. And I guess that's to building 2 high-rise buildings in the Golden Gate Village. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, Jan, I'm happy to address that because this is one of the issues that I do want to explain now. And I think we need more community meetings and information to really understand this. So you have 5 large buildings, the high rise in Golden Gate Village, as well as some lovely 2- and 3-story garden apartments that were all part of the original development there. How shall I say this? The HUD standards, and I think they make sense, are to house people in units that are appropriately sized for the family living in them. And I think familiar to a lot of us who are rattling around in our homes now that our children and even our grandchildren are out, well, gone. We do have individuals and couples who may not need the extra bedrooms that they have. And so as part of renovation, there is a desire to accommodate these individuals and couples in 1- and 2-bedroom units. Now, it's also the case that extended family may be living with singles and couples. And to the extent that happens, these families should be accommodated as the renovation goes forward in a way that makes enough bedrooms available to them. So I want everyone to know that we understand houses, they grow, they get small, they grow. Both of our sons were home with us after being out of the house working. They came home during the pandemic. So building new buildings is a part of accommodating this fluctuation. And there is a option to create, in at least currently, a need to create a senior housing complex for seniors. And my hope would be that we would tailor that, just as the Redwoods did, to the needs of seniors. Now, not every senior wants to live with all seniors, and we know that too. So it would not be that that's the only place that seniors would live, but that would be something that would then open up some units with 3 and 4 bedrooms to new families who need those bedrooms to raise their families. The option that we've been studying so far, this largest option, which has the senior building and potentially a second building to accommodate a second new building to accommodate new families. But what it also does, it provides a place to relocate families while we are renovating the 5 buildings on site. And that's real. In past, perhaps people were put up in hotels out of the area. I can tell you for young families, they've said to us that would really interrupt their whole kids going to school at Bayside MLK and Willow Creek School if they were moved out of the neighborhood. So a new building would help provide temporary housing for the families while we do the renovation project. And let's talk about renovation. This is down to the studs renovation. This is not redoing a back bedroom. This is going in and gutting these units. And the reason I'm emphatic about this, there's been discussion of let's leave people in the buildings while this happens. I don't think from a health standpoint, that's a good idea to have construction debris and particulate matter, mold if it's there, whatever, The electrical is going to be pulled, the plumbing is going to go. Any of us who have done major home remodels know that if you can, it's really great to be somewhere else where all that's happening. So these are the reasons for the new buildings. It isn't to say both of them will happen. We need to go through an environmental impact review process. We're also going to be entertaining Golden Gate Village, which has a renovation only. Only want renovation, no new buildings. We have to talk through how we would accommodate the families during the renovation process if we did not build new buildings, and how we would accommodate seniors and new families. So that's a discussion we need to have, and we will. I'm committed to it.
Thank you. There seems to be some questions about the specifics of I'm not sure whether this is exactly where we want to talk about it, but I just want to put out there that people have questions about the developer being from New Jersey. Is that person selected? Is there going to be a place for public comment about the developer that's selected? Wouldn't it be better to have somebody in Marin? Questions like that. They have concerns about the track record of the person that's been selected for.
Yeah. So let me just say, I think there will be public meetings and further discussion of all this later this summer. It's a little premature for me to comment on it. I would just say Michaels has done many projects throughout the United States. They've done a project in Los Angeles. It's also the case there are other developers and whatnot. I think for right now, we are focused on getting the right scope of work, and one that is supported by the community and by Marin County. And then we'll go into the EIR process, and then we'll get back into the developer question. So that's the sequence as I see it. And this is all under discussion right now.
And there'll be opportunities for community to speak, and there'll be open meetings and things like that.
Yes, there will be. And let me just add, if you have comments, anyone who is watching today, please send them to my office. You don't need to wait until these public meetings. You're welcome. I'm S. Moulton-Peters at marincounty.org, and we'll get that into the chat a little later. But you're welcome to do this now. I've been receiving comments all along, and I welcome those comments.
Then I have some other questions on different matters. One that is near and dear to most people's heart is, I would appreciate your weighing in on the dramatic traffic situation on Blythedale Avenue heading toward 101, not only during commute hours, starting at 2:45 Monday through Friday. Yeah. And they have theories on why this is, but I'd be interested to hear from you.
Great. No, happy to answer that. And in 2015, we experienced a similar deluge of traffic. And we made a very intentional effort to study who was out there and when and what can we do about it. And that resulted in our yellow school bus program, which did take enough traffic off the road to ease congestion for everyone else. So I want people to know the solution to traffic is not removing 50% of the cars. It's generally removing 5 to 10% of the cars, or otherwise addressing traffic flows. So I'm aware right now that signal timing, we have our signals from Blythedale over the overpass onto the Highway 101. Mayor John McCauley was part of a task force that I served on, very instrumental in working through the issues with Caltrans. Much of our bottleneck can be attributed to the signal timing when they don't all function smoothly, and they cause backups. So that I'm aware there are timing issues right now. I'm also aware of something that involves all of us, which is basically we've all come out from the shadows, we're back in our cars and we're starting to go places. The kids are back in school, and everybody's in their own little pod, in their own car by themselves right now for understandable reasons. We're not quite far enough along with getting everybody vaccinated. So we're still in individual cars, and everyone's going to the beach too. And I do know that any community that has a road leading to the beach, as Blythedale or Shoreline Highway through Tam Valley or out Sir Francis Drake to Point Reyes, they're all overrun with people from all over the Bay Area as well as locals. So what do we do about that? A few things. Again, it's incumbent on all of us to look at how we make our own trips. And I think most of us have learned when school hours are. So school's back in session. Kids are getting driven to school to the extent they feel comfortable walking and biking, which I've always proposed. And then, what trips can we defer or make if we can't shift the time? And then finally, the signal timing that is underway. The city's having discussions with Caltrans and the county right now. Later this year, however, will be something I think will be a factor. The ramp metering, you've seen all the work on the Blythedale interchange for the northbound lanes. That whole overpass and interchange is what takes a lot of our green light timing, which backs us up on Blythedale. When we start using those 2 lanes to get onto the on-ramp to go northbound, that should open up more green light space for us traveling east out of Mill Valley. I don't have a time frame for that yet, and it will be a little bit of an adjustment as we get used to that whole new system that will be up and down the 101. But it does work in other places, and I think it'll work here in Marin County and be part of the solution.
Thank you. Another question. Many of our small businesses owners and their employees and young professionals, teachers, first responders cannot afford to live in Marin because of the cost. Have you considered the problem and have any solutions to increase supply of middle income workforce housing in Marin?
Yeah, and again, this is a problem that involves all of us to be part of the solution. We've had a wonderful situation here in Marin County for many years, much longer than I've lived here. It moved from rural agrarian to suburban, to more suburban after World War II. Then the 80s was the next big bump in growth, as it was all over the Bay Area. Our housing production in Marin, though, is something that we have not produced enough affordable housing. I think everybody tuning in knows this. And what this means is that our teachers and our public safety and those who work in our local businesses cannot afford to live here. It's been compounded by the tech industry moving into San Francisco. My husband and I went into Mission Bay to UCSF, and I was shocked that there's another half of a city that's been built in the last 20 years. So we have more jobs associated with that in the tech industry. It all puts more pressure on housing prices, which are quite high, as I think you must all know. Therefore, we have to make an intentional effort to create workforce and affordable housing. And this means we all have to learn to say yes to some new projects in the right locations that are well designed to make room for people that we need and deserve to live in our communities. Marin County has been resistant. Mill Valley has a track record of creating affordable housing, but we've not created any recently. The council is undertaking that. There are efforts in the other Southern Marin communities, but we need to get to yes on this. And it may mean seeing another example. I point to the Redwoods. That is affordable senior living, but we need multifamily, perhaps on Miller and in other locations. We need to allow for the accessory dwelling, granny units. The seminary development over in Strawberry will happen. That has to be carefully planned, but that's another opportunity for housing. We need to look sincerely at solutions right now and be able to say yes and get our friends and neighbors to say yes.
Please update us on any changes within the Sheriff's Department to address racial profiling and past negative interactions with people of color. Is the county changing their funding of the department to use social workers and counselors more often?
Yes, they have done this at the budget hearings in June of 2020. Funding, I believe almost $2 million in funding to the sheriff was redirected to social equity and social support systems. Not all of those funds have been allocated yet, but they are reserved for these. There is a pilot mobile emergency unit. I'm not getting the acronym right, but that would be 2 social workers available to go out with first responders, with our police, to assess situations that are largely mental health related. The sheriff has changed his practices quite a bit, and forgive me, I did not come prepared today to articulate that, but I'm happy to send information to the club to promote as a follow-up. The sheriff has modified a number of his practices working with ICE. And so there has been change. There are efforts here at the county to dig more deeply into county practices and creating more social equity, more racial equity throughout the entire county. So I don't think it's just focused on the sheriff. There's always more to do. There's always more to do, and I'm open to hearing comments about that as well.
Thank you. I have a question about how agenda items during supervisor meetings are allotted. There's a person here who's tried to participate in the meetings, but they seem to occur hours into the meetings. Housing is a big issue in the county, and I would hope that this would be an earlier agenda item.
Yeah, you know, we've been one of those interesting outgrowths of COVID where we've been online for our meetings, and the positive part is we've had much greater participation in meetings. We've seen this actually at meetings in all of our cities and towns and the county. It's easier to participate, and people do, and so the wait time to get to your turn in public comment, and then the number of public comments extends the length of the meeting, and so we're often running later than we hope to. There is a regular schedule of agenda items. Parks and Open Space comes once a month. The Marin Housing Authority comes once a month. So there is a rhythm to all of this. If you're not, Janet, did the questioner just say that it was difficult to know when to tune in? Is that
yeah, and that it seemed like it was very late in the agenda, and
yeah. I wish I had a magic solution for that. I don't. I'm waiting just like everybody else to see how long these discussions go. So I guess I would ask for everybody's forbearance and patience, and just hang in there with us. What I would suggest is have the meeting going, put the sound on mute, do something else, chores around the house or reading or work or what have you, and then tune in every so often to see where we are and do it that way. And thank you for being patient.
Thank you. So here's another question. As a result of COVID trauma, is the county looking at increasing funds to the emerging need of mental health amongst our community? Teen suicides and alcoholic drinking until death are on the rise in my anecdotal experience.
Yes, in fact, I was just talking with Benita McLaren, our Director of Health and Human Services, and we did talk about mental health in middle school students and the recent, I believe there's been 2 suicides, which is very tragic in these young children. It is, I think it is definitely the case that the social and personal mental health impacts of COVID have been as great as any of the physical acute impacts of COVID. And we will have a lot of work ahead of us to address the trauma and the impacts, the isolation, the grief that has come with COVID. And yes, our health and services, human services is aware of this. We are focusing more resources with working with our community partners. We know that, frankly, after the urgency of vaccination now is subsiding and we're turning the corner, it really is time for mental health. And I think that will be the next major issue that we deal with.
How will the county pay for the rehabilitation at Golden Gate Village?
Well, I'm glad that question was asked. Financing these projects is no small undertaking. I've been in conversation with organizations working in affordable housing, nonprofits here in the Bay Area. The model, it is absolutely the case that HUD does not fund the maintenance of public housing adequately, has not done this. And for the last 10 or 20 years has moved into a model that moves these public housing projects either into a nonprofit situation, or it is also the case with a private developer who will remodel and renovate, has a ground lease with the housing authority, will rent the units out in a HUD-sponsored program for HUD vouchers. And the HUD vouchers on a per unit basis will subsidize rents and keep them affordable for everyone who has been in the public housing before. And this is a 55-year arrangement. During that time, the rents are fixed, but what you do see is that the financing of housing and maintaining it moves from just a straight HUD underfunded situation to one that involves developers who specialize in public housing, working with nonprofits that specialize in housing, and with counties to continue to have the housing, but that is much better supported financially and able to be maintained. So there's acronyms for this. I can go into that offline, but Marin County is looking at these kinds of funding strategies. They've been employed in San Francisco with the SF Hope renovation of all of their public housing, as well as Oakland, Eden, and Bridge, and Mercy Housing, and Michael have all been part of these discussions. So that is the state of affairs. Yeah.
I have a COVID vaccination question. To what extent, if any, might the lower vax level in the Hispanic community be a result of anxiety about immigration status? Your thoughts or recommendations?
Yes, that's a very good question that the questioner asked, and we understood that. We did not ask for, proof of residency in the vaccinations. We worked very closely with Canal Community Alliance and other organizations, Community Action Marin, and others to not only get the word out and to engage with the local community, but to be the ones who communicated that we were not going to ask anyone to show proof of residency to qualify for a vaccination. So that was an issue to begin with, and we did have to make a concerted effort to do outreach through the two groups and others that I just stated.
Why do so many people from unincorporated Mill Valley use the Mill Valley City Council as their main access point to local government?
So when I was a council member, I did hear this, and you have a wonderful, if I may say so, a wonderful city council in Mill Valley, and traditionally we have for decades. It's a very well run city and city council. When I was campaigning for supervisor, I was often asked, how come we can't have the same level of service that the city of Mill Valley gives to their residents? I said, guys, I'm sorry, it's a numbers game. One supervisor, 5 city council members. Where do you think you're going to get more veneer in representation? And I am absolutely trying to bring the Mill Valley style of open and engaged government to the unincorporated area. And there is just me and my staff. So I understand why unincorporated residents will come to the county. They can also go to the Tam Valley Community Services District, the Strawberry Design Review Board or Recreation Board, the Marin City Community Services District. Those do play the role of local government in those areas. And that's what we have to work with. So, but all these boards are there to serve, as am I.
I read in today's IJ, not me, but the questioner, that the city of Mill Valley is backpedaling on requiring property owners to comply with firefighter recommendations regarding management of hazardous vegetation. Please clarify issues and status.
Well, I really think I ought to defer that one to a Mill Valley Council member. I certainly am aware that they have a wildfire ordinance in place. I believe they just revised it and approved it. It did incorporate more vegetation removal than has been the case in the past, more clearing around your house to create a buffer zone against your house. That was very controversial. I do think it's the direction that we will be going as the state addresses wildfire preparedness. But let me just say that that's a better council question for a definitive answer.
Thank you. Housing crisis collides with other critical issues, including increased traffic, impact on evacuation routes, not to mention water. As of yesterday, Marin's reservoir capacity fell below 40,000 acre feet. A previous OAC speaker blew off concerns about water resources versus increasing water hookups with, "You'll figure something out." Respectfully, should we figure out water resources before we add hookups? What solutions are available to us? Can we rely on being able to purchase water from outside Marin? I believe that both Sonoma and Contra Costa County want to retain their water for their own constituencies. Desalination, how long to bring such a facility online and at what cost to whom? If Marin increases housing, affordable or not, will water be available affordably or not?
Yeah, well, the questioners obviously spent a lot of time thinking about that. That's a very fine-grained question, and so I'm going to try and respond in kind. Yes, we absolutely have to be cognizant of the water resources that we have, especially as we head into this pretty dire drought season. There is a lot of information about water usage in Marin County. MMWD has done a number of studies, and we do have to be cognizant of our capacity to add additional hookups and residents. However, I want to add this because this is also what needs to be looked at. We have some very large water using properties in Marin County that use a lot of water to irrigate acreage, largely for just residential enjoyment. And you know, to me, that is a practice that in light of wildfires and climate change and just addressing reality, we need to take a look at. Is it realistic to have an English garden in Mediterranean drought-prone California? The average apartment building uses a very small percent of what some of these larger water users use. So in looking at what is it we're going to allow and what is it we're going to not allow, I think we have to get really into the detail of where's the water going, how's it being used, is it being used wisely, could we accommodate some more growth? And I'm primarily talking about multifamily affordable. I want to be clear. I want that. I think there's places to locate it in Marin. It will have some consequences for water and traffic, and we have to look at those closely. But these are going to be smaller footprint units. And as we just said earlier in the earlier question, we have people that need to be living in our communities and cannot afford to do that. And that needs to be balanced in with water and traffic and all of our other concerns. And we can do it. We can do it.
We have we're nearing the end of our time. We have a few more questions. And the last three questions seem to be specifically related to the Golden Gate Village. One of them, the first question is asking about office space in the Golden Gate Village to meet residents on day-to-day business or to hold meetings. The second one says that there's a lawsuit filed by the Golden Gate Village Residents Council and accuses the Marin Housing Authority of deliberate negligence designed to push back Black and low-income residents. And can you comment on Marin City incorporation efforts? I know that's a lot, but if there's...
Sure. Let me start with the last question first. I support Marin City's efforts to look at incorporation. I think communities, every community deserves the right to incorporate and to be self-governing. And frankly, someone asked me about the unincorporated areas. I think sometimes the unincorporated areas ought to look at annexing to the cities, not in Marin City's case. But so running a city is complex and it takes money. And those things will have to get looked at as Marin City studies with LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission, which is who they will work with to evaluate the feasibility of incorporating. The tax base in Marin City is not as great as we might like. Some of it is tied up in the financing of redevelopment bonds in association with the Gateway Shopping Center and the housing that was put in at the same time. My understanding is those bonds will expire in 2024, be paid off, and that will open up some more funding to Marin City. But incorporation is a serious matter. I support their efforts, and it has to be looked at closely. And then as far as the rest of the Golden Gate Village questions, these are people here today who have been looking at this issue very closely. So I think I forgot. A lawsuit will not, I can't comment on the lawsuit. Sorry about that. And then again, you know, we want to foster a dialogue that with Marin City residents, and then there are a lot from outside of the Marin City. Many of you are probably watching today who have gotten into the dialogue or just learning about Marin City in the last year. Good, we need that. And we need to have more community dialogue about what's wanted, what some of our financial constraints and requirements are, and how we get the renovation done. Because in the end, that's what we want, is to make those housing units as beautiful as the people that live in them.
You talked about the traffic problems in Mill Valley. What about Tiburon Boulevard?
Yes, Tiburon Boulevard, very similar to East Blythedale. You know, throughout Marin County, it's all the same. We're either back in the valley or out on the peninsula, but there's, you know, one or two ways in, one or two ways out. That's it. So we're all in the same boat. If you live off Sir Francis Drake, that is really not something I'd want to do. Same thing. Anyway, yes, Tiburon Boulevard, God bless Tiburon and Belvedere. They wisely looked at their traffic like we did on Blythedale, decided that running yellow school buses was going to, again, reduce traffic at least 5 to 10% so that it would open up. That is what's happening. They're going to look at reinstituting those for the coming school year. We'll have the new traffic lights that I talked about, and the highway ramp metering to meter the traffic that goes onto the highway so that happens more smoothly and doesn't back up our local streets. So that's what Tiburon is involved with also.
Last question. Is there a sensitivity to not allowing gentrification of Marin City, like we've seen in many Black communities in the Bay Area and other major cities? Thank you for your transparency.
Yeah, no, and thank you for this question, because it's a huge question. I know it's a very serious concern for everyone. The public housing will stay public housing. The rents will remain the same. We are going to accommodate the families that live in the public housing. It is not being turned into market rate. No matter who develops that property, it is going to stay affordable public housing for people of low and very low income. I know that gentrification has happened in other circumstances, and the Board of Supervisors is aware of this, and we are taking steps that is not part of our project at all. And preserving the community, the affordability, promoting a pathway to home ownership, which is what is really needed here. And then small scale community land trust is also an avenue on the order of the Bolinas and Point Reyes land trusts. There's resources. This is a model we think we can replicate on the scale and pace that those land trusts have occurred.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you to everybody for the really detailed questions. It seems like we had a really engaged audience. Thank you, Stephanie, very much. So I just want to thank Stephanie again for her willingness to speak to us today. We all appreciate the clarity of her vision for the future of our county. Thank you to those who attended the presentation. We hope you found it enlightening. The next Outdoor Art Club event will be May 13th from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. The presenter will be Dr. Jay Prochaska, Professor of Galactic and Stellar Studies at UC Santa Cruz. He will talk about the latest exciting discoveries in astrophysics. Be ready for some surprises. Thank you.